Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I used to be a stock car racer, but that all changed one fateful day when I was hit and slammed into a wall, fracturing a vertebrae. It was a painful reminder that life can throw you off track when you least expect it. Despite hanging up my recent helmet, I still had a passion for cars and would often gather with my racing buddies to reminisce about the good old days. Every Friday night our tradition was to race and then stop at a 24-hour restaurant that had plenty of parking space for our truck and car hauler while keeping an eye on our precious vehicles. This particular restaurant was a haven for night owls like us, and it had an added bonus. Half of its walls were large windows, making it easy to spot our cars or trucks with trailers no matter where we parked. One fine Friday evening, my buddies and I decided to drive to our beloved restaurant by car instead of our usual hauler. I have a handicap placard due to my previous spine surgeries, which made it essential for me to have access to handicap parking spaces. Little did I know that this evening would turn into a dramatic showdown that I'd soon be sharing on r/entitled people. We pulled into the restaurant's parking lot and my heart sank when I saw a massive truck with a boat hitched to it, occupying all 5 handicap parking spaces. It was a blatant disregard for the rules, and it infuriated me. I couldn't stand people who thought they were above the law, especially when it came to handicapped spots. I turned to my buddies and said, "This is unacceptable. I can't let this slide." I reached for my phone and dialed the police non-emergency number. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, emphasizing that I had a valid handicap placard and this parking violation was both unfair and unlawful. After we placed our order inside the restaurant, the police officer arrived, and the drama began. My buddies and I watched with anticipation as the boat owner, a burly man with a scruffy beard, observed the officer outside and decided to go out and meet him. We couldn't hear their conversation, but there was a lot of angry gesticulating from the boat owner, who seemed to be fuming. The officer eventually handed the boat owner some papers and departed, leaving the boat owner with a red face and a furious expression. He returned to the restaurant as if he had just stormed the Capitol or something. He began berating the teen employees behind the counter, screaming and demanding answers. The employees, looking terrified, assured him that they hadn't called the police. However, the boat owner refused to accept their explanations and continued to unleash his rage upon them. I couldn't stand by any longer, not when this entitled boater was terrorizing the restaurant staff. I stood up from my seat and said, "I call the police." The boat owner's fiery gaze turned toward me, and his anger shifted from the restaurant employees to me. It was nothing new to me. I had grown up with a father who had anger issues, so facing this guy was like deja vu. Over the years, I had learned to confront such individuals head-on, not letting their temperamental outbursts intimidate me. I continued, "You're nothing more than an entitled jerk who thinks giving your boat special treatment is okay. Look at all the perfectly visible spaces we use to park our race cars. So why be such a jerk and take up all 5 handicapped spots?" The restaurant fell silent as my words hung in the air. The boat owner's face turned an even deeper shade of red, and he began hurling a barrage of insults my way. He called me names I hadn't heard since middle school and questioned my right to challenge him. Ignoring his verbal abuse, I stood my ground and replied, "Well, you can insult me all you want, but you can't change the fact that you were in the wrong. It's about time someone called you out on your entitled behavior." Suddenly, 3 of the boater's buddies stepped in, sensing that their friend's anger was getting out of control. They attempted to defuse the situation, urging him to let it go and leave the restaurant. It turned out that the police officer had given the boat owner 5 tickets. one for each handicapped parking space he had occupied. Each ticket carried a hefty fine of $250, amounting to a whopping $1,250. And the boat owner's expensive lunch had just become a financial nightmare. To provide a clearer image of myself at the time this incident occurred, I was employed by the state, working with public benefits and assistance programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and Medicaid. I stand at 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I used to be a power lifter, weighing in at 340 pounds. So yes, I am quite large. The dress code for state employees is generally business casual, unless you work at the central office or in a public-facing role. I spent about 90% of my time on the phone. On this particular day in question in 2018, I was wearing my one and only suit, which had been tailored to fit me due to my size. Now, since this was a few years ago, some details may be paraphrased, as my memory isn't perfect. I've taken a few too many hits to the head during my youth. I serve as a dungeon master for a weekly Dungeons & Dragons game that takes place at a friend's house every Thursday. At that time, I was in my late 30s. As I was leaving work that day, my friend called and asked if I could pick up some new dice for him because his 3 dogs had mistaken his dice for treats and chewed them up. So I stopped by a local game store on my way to his place. While I was there, I noticed a frustrated young woman attempting to communicate something to the store owner using American Sign Language, which happens to be the only language other than English that I understand. I tapped her on the shoulder and signed to her, offering my assistance. She explained that she was interested in getting into Dungeons & Dragons with some of her deaf friends from school. They had never played before but were inspired by the success of Critical Role and wanted to give it a try. She mentioned that she would be the dungeon master. I helped her select everything she needed for new players, and she was genuinely grateful for the assistance, especially since I could communicate with her in American Sign Language. She thought it was considerate of the store owner to learn sign language as well. I explained to her that she had been working with the owner when I arrived, and that I was simply an enthusiastic Dungeons & Dragons fan and dungeon master who had come in to buy some dice. She looked at me puzzled and signed, "So you don't work here?" I replied, "Nope, I just wanted to help because I know sign language." We both had a good laugh. Now back to the dice. That's when Karen made her entrance. She began yelling at the store owner, demanding to know why he was spending all his time assisting the young woman but wouldn't bother to help an elderly customer who just wanted to purchase a video game, though this particular store did not sell video games. To provide a mental picture, Karen was about 5 feet tall with a classic Karen haircut, weighing around 240 pounds and in her early 40s. If she had a grandchild who played video games, it seemed some questionable life choices might have been made. The actual store owner explained that he assists anyone who comes to the counter, and if they need help on the store floor, he does his best to assist them. But Karen then pointed at me and said, "No, I am talking about the owner." The real owner and I exchanged looks and simultaneously replied, "Lady, I don't work here, and he is the owner. This store doesn't sell video games." We shared a smile. This is when Karen lost her temper, questioning why a game store wouldn't sell video games and wondering what she should do now. She waddled over to me, poking me in the chest while ranting about how I should be nicer to older customers, as they were the ones keeping the store open. At this point, I revealed my state employee badge and pointed to it, saying slowly, "Lady, I don't work here," and informed her that she could go to the gaming store next door to find what she wanted. I then explained that, according to state and federal law, her poking me in the chest constituted assault. At this point, she sputtered and slapped me. When I attempted to speak again, she slapped me once more. This is when I became quite annoyed. I stood to my full height and shouted at the top of my lungs that if she touched me one more time, I would defend myself, and she wouldn't like the outcome. By this point, the store owner had called the police and had the phone on speaker. We all heard when dispatch mentioned that the officer was only 2 minutes away. Karen screamed and then attempted to slap me again. I got her wrist, spun her around and pinned her hand to her back. I grabbed her other hand and held both her hands behind her back, at arm's length, to prevent her from kicking me in the shins. This was when the police arrived. Now, when you have a guy who's over a foot taller than you holding a screaming woman at bay, it is natural for the cops to assume that you might be in the wrong. Officer 1 was a lady and the Officer 2 was a guy. Officer 1 entered first and saw the situation, saying, "Sir, please release a woman." I responded, "I will, as long as she doesn't hit me again." Karen started claiming that I had hit her and that she was merely defending herself, insisting that I should be arrested. Officer 2, hearing this, pulled out his taser and said, "Sir, you need to let her go now." I released Karen and raised my hands to hit level. Karen spun around, kicked me, and then slapped me again. The store owner chimed in, stating that this was the third and fourth time she had assaulted me. Officer 1 then handcuffed Karen and escorted her out to the police car. Officer 2, who was a shorter individual standing at about 5 feet 8, continued to keep an eye on me and expressed his intention to handcuff me. I explained that it wouldn't be possible with his handcuffs because my wrists were too large and he would need zip cuffs. I also suggested that he call a sergeant if he intended to arrest me. Officer 2 took a step back and asked, "Are you resisting arrest?" I replied, "No, but I will exercise my right to a lawful investigation before arrest. You know, innocent until proven guilty and all that. I was simply defending myself from being assaulted by that screaming woman your partner just removed. If you want me handcuffed while you figure things out and for your own safety, I am completely fine with that. I'm just letting you know that my wrists won't fit your metal cuffs." Officer 1 returned and reported that Karen had been detained and was requesting a supervisor. The store owner provided his account of the incident and Officer 2 no longer pointing his taser at me. He joked about checking if the cuffs would really fit. I extended my right hand and he attempted to cuff me, discovering that indeed they wouldn't fit. For reference, the minimum inside parameter of the handcuffs is 7.9 inches, 20 centimeters when a ratchet is engaged at first notch, while the maximum parameter is 6.5 inches, 16 centimeters when a ratchet is engaged at the last notch. My wrist measures around 10 inches. Officers 1 and 2 were both surprised that the cuffs wouldn't fit me and acknowledged that even if they did fit due to my size, they wouldn't be able to cuff me behind my back. At this point, the sergeant arrived, entered the scene, saw me, and greeted me by saying, "Hey Rusty, long time no see." I responded with, "Hey Sarge." To make a long story short, Karen was arrested for assault, and yes, I decided to press charges. According to what I learned from the sergeant, this incident marked her 12th encounter involving similar issues, but it was the first time she had become physically violent with someone. Lucky me indeed. Hey guys, I've got a situation on my hands, and I need some advice. Some folks around here think I might be the jerk, but I'm just trying to stand my ground. So let me share what's been going on. I live on a piece of land out in the countryside. It's a peaceful place and I've got a bunch of animals that keep me company. But for over a year now, there has been this one kid in the area who's been nothing but trouble. This kid, let's call him Jake, has been a real nuisance. He's always trespassing onto my land, drinking and smoking, and messing with my animals. It all started when he let out one of my goats and she went missing for days. I tried to be patient and talk to his parents about it, but they kept giving me the whole kids will be kids spiel and promised to talk to him. A couple months ago, I reached my breaking point and Jake came into my land with a BB gun and he started shooting at my chickens just for fun. I couldn't stand for it anymore, so I called the cops on him. I decided to press charges for trespassing and animal cruelty. It was a tough decision, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. I mean, my animals were suffering because of his actions. Well, here is where things take a turn. It turns out that Jake had a scholarship that had some sort of good citizenship, ethics, and behavioral clause. My actions caused him to lose that scholarship. His parents have been coming around begging me to drop the charges because they need that scholarship money. I get it, times are tough and college is expensive. But here's the thing, I believe in consequences. Jake needs to learn a lesson, and his parents need to realize that they just can't sweep his actions under the rug. I told him that this should be a wake-up call for both him and them. But they are calling me a jerk for ruining their child's future, saying that I'm setting him up for failure because now he will graduate with debt. My girlfriend thinks I should drop it. She says he came around once with his parents to apologize, so maybe that's enough. But here's the thing, folks, I am not so sure. I have this nagging feeling that he's only apologizing because he's desperate and wants to get out of this mess. If I let it go, what message does that send? That he can bully, whine, and plead his way out of anything? I don't want to be the bad guy here, but I also don't want to be a pushover. And now some comments on a post. Someone saying, "You're not the jerk. He doesn't deserve a scholarship based on his good citizenship. He doesn't display good citizenship, simply. That's on him, not you. He's been warned before and it's cruel to terrorize animals. He's just not being a nice person. He's an adult, he's old enough to be in college and therefore old enough to know how to not be an awful person who menaces innocent animals. Stay firm on this, you're doing the right thing." Another commenter adds, "Not the jerk. You gave him and his parents chances to correct his behavior. His parents didn't take your complaint seriously and neither did he. He escalated his bad behavior to include animal cruelty and now he has to deal with those consequences. From what you described about his behavior leading up to what got him in trouble, he doesn't meet the good citizen/ethics requirement and it's his fault, he doesn't deserve to go." A third commenter goes with, "Not the jerk. He was warned and he didn't care. He lost a scholarship, but hey, at least he learned that actions have consequences." This happened well over 10 years ago, but every so often, I remember it and smile because it's a nice memory to me, no matter how fuzzy the details are. A bit of backstory, I went to a school that was over 3.5 miles from my house, since it was the only school with a gifted program. I think my mom didn't drive me to school because of her job at the time, but there was a bus stop to get to my school at the other school that was a little under a mile from my house. So every morning she would get me ready and then we'd get in her car and drive to the bus stop. I'd get out to wait for the bus and she'd leave when the bus came. Here is where the story starts. At the time of the story, probably 2nd grade, I was on horrible terms with a girl in my class. I forgot who bullied who, but eventually we made up. Enter her older brother and his friend. I think they were in 6th grade and I remember them being significantly taller than me. I have no idea why, but one day they decided that every day at the bus stop while we were waiting for the bus or our rides, they were going to bully me. It turned out kinda small, calling me names regarding my weight, calling me weird and so on. I've always been obese, I'll admit it. I was also autistic, but I wouldn't be diagnosed for a few more years, despite my mom fighting for a diagnosis since I was in any sort of schooling. What they said hurt me, but I never showed it. And then it escalated. It had probably been a few months by this point and they hadn't stopped the bullying. It was another afternoon and I was waiting for my mom, trying to ignore them, smushing berries from the bush beside the school doors with my fingers. I don't know what sparked it, but I heard laughing as a brother of the girl I previously had issues with grabbed onto one of the pillars and pretended as if he was being sucked in by something. Well, that something was me, he said. She has her own gravitational pull, and some other things that implied that I was as big as a planet. His friend had joined in at this point. I tried to hold it together, but I couldn't. I cried in silence, and when my mom pulled up and I got in the car, she asked me what was wrong, and I completely broke. I explained through sobs that the boys who were still at the bus stop were bullying me, and I like to imagine that this made my mom see red. Things are a bit fuzzy from here, but I believe my mom called the bus garage, and bus coordinator person told them the situation, and a few days later the boys stopped showing up at the bus stop. I forget who told me, but I found out that she had managed to get them kicked off the bus for the rest of the year. Well, from then on, I looked up to my mom more than I had before, and I felt so much closer to her. Sadly, she is not here to help me anymore, but now I can stand up for myself without her help. Rest in peace, Mom. I totally forgot about this story until I heard a similar one recently. This happened many years ago, but it's still fresh in my memory because it was just so absurd. I briefly wrote about it in my journal, and now I feel like sharing it on r/entitled people. Back then I was in my late 30s, just like the rest of our group. I used to have a friend, but we lost touch because she moved away. Her younger sister was an absolute nightmare, and her 8-year-old daughter was a tiny terror. This kid was a little devil, and her mom, my friend's sister, encouraged her terrible behavior. The kid had a knack for taking other people's things and either destroying them, eating them, or just stealing them. If you dared to stop her, she'd throw a fit and her mom would come to her defense. Naturally, her mother never offered to replace anything her daughter ruined. One night, a group of us women got together at my friend's house for a horrible movie marathon. We did this 2 to 3 times a month, always with a different theme, and friends and spouses were welcome. But one strict rule was no young kids allowed. We were already deep into our first movie along with 2 bottles of wine, when my friend's front door burst open and her sister walked in unannounced. She claimed she was going clubbing and tried to dump her kid on us, saying we were staying home anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal. My friend was understandably furious and flatly refused to babysit the kid. She later told us that her reasons were numerous. The kid was a spoiled, destructive brat. Her sister didn't call or ask permission despite multiple warnings. This was her time to unwind with friends, not babysit her sister's terrible child. None of the movies were suitable for children, and she wasn't about to change her plans just because her sister wanted to go clubbing. When did I mention the kid was a spoiled and destructive brat? My friend didn't say all of this at the time, but she firmly said no. Her sister and the kid threw a tantrum in response. It turned out that her sister had promised the little goblin a fun movie night with Auntie. As they argued, the kid seized the opportunity to grab the remote and started playing the DVD we had paused when they barged in. It happened to be the 1988 remake of The Plop, and it was my movie. The kid began watching, and we were too preoccupied with the sister's squabble to notice. Ironically, we had paused the movie right before a particularly horrifying and gruesome scene where a little boy gets grabbed, pulled underwater, and emerges half-melted and screaming before being dragged back under to be devoured. Of course, the brat freaked out and started crying, which alerted her mother. She yelled at us for letting her child watch our disgusting movies, probably throwing in a few F-bombs, and then demanded to know who the movie belonged to. I didn't specifically like this woman, so I got up to confront her. Surprisingly, another friend of mine, a buff and sporty girl, who the mother actively feared, also stood up. They had a past beef from a fist fight at a party when a Uber witch flirted with my friend's fiancé, then slapped her. My friend had promptly beaten the crap out of her in front of everyone. My friend stared down at her sister and said, "It doesn't matter whose movie it is. What matters is that you came in here uninvited, gave your sister a hard time, didn't watch your kid, and then got mad when your kid once again touched things that didn't belong to her and scared herself. I suggest you take your kid, turn around, and go home." A reasonable person might have followed that advice, but Uber Witch wasn't known for her intelligence. Instead of leaving, she turned to me and got in my face, probably thinking I wouldn't retaliate because she was smaller than me. She was right about that, but she was also very wrong. I've always had a temper, and it often first manifests as sarcasm. But when pushed too far, I won't hesitate to stand my ground, regardless of the other person's size. She started screaming at me, a cacophony of nonsense I didn't bother to listen to, except for a sentence or two like, "We needed to care for her kid." When she paused for a press, I responded, "Why is it our job to watch your kid? None of us pushed her out of our womb." She gasped, just like in a graphic novel, and she screamed in my face, "You have a son!" I was getting really mad at this point and retorted, "Yes, I do have a son. But do you see him here? No." "Well, that's because I'm not a self-centered jerk who bring him to an adults-only gathering or dump him on others without asking." This set her off even more and she tried to slap me. Fortunately for me, she fought like a girl. Unfortunately for her, I don't discriminate when it comes to defending myself. As she pulled her arm back to strike, I moved slightly to the side, grabbed her arm, rotated it behind her back, yanked her hair and slammed her face into the nearest wall, pinning her arm. It felt oddly satisfying. She struggled and cursed, but I wasn't letting go. I gave her 3 choices. Leave with her kid quietly, have me beat her in front of her kid, I'd never do that but she didn't know that, or have me call the police and her ex, who despised her because she cheated, to come pick up the kid. She reluctantly agreed to the first option, but then tried to get her sister to side with her because, you know, family. My friend responded by taking her keys and removing her house key. She firmly told her that neither she nor her kid were welcome in her house and to get out. The entitled mother's shock was palpable and she looked at all of us for support. We just glared at her. Realizing nobody would side with her, she grabbed her kid, hurled some choice insults at us, especially me, and she left, slamming the door behind her. My friend apologized to us, but we all knew her sister was a jerk in this situation. She immediately called her parents, warned them about her sister's antics, and advised them to go anywhere else unless they wanted to watch the brat all weekend. Her sister had pulled similar stunts multiple times. In the end, the entitled mother missed out on her clubbing plans and eventually lost custody of her kid to her ex. It was a fitting consequence for her irresponsible behavior. So, I'm pretty new to the work world with just about 5.5 months under my belt at the car wash where I work. My job isn't anything fancy, but it pays a bill and I like it. It's a simple job and it keeps me busy. I've been getting into the routine of work and there is a specific uniform I have to wear. The shirt and apron I put on for work happen to be partially red in color, and that's where the confusion comes into play. At the end of my shift, I'd usually head home on foot. It takes me around 20 to 30 minutes to make it back. And on my way, I often make a quick stop at a nearby grocery store to pick up some drinks and snacks. It's a bit of a routine for me, you know, unwind a bit before going home. Now one day I goofed up big time. I forgot to change out my work uniform before heading to the grocery store. So there I was, still wearing my car wash shirt and apron. The grocery store employees had a different uniform, a button-up shirt with various colors, which was quite different from mine. I wasn't aware of my mistake until I found myself standing in a drink aisle trying to decide what to buy. And that's when it all started. I felt a tug on my uniform sleeve and I turned to see the classic Karen. She was a bit shorter than me and I stand at 5 foot 10 inches, and I stepped back thinking I might be blocking her way. But it wasn't about the aisle space. The problem was something else entirely. "Excuse me, you're out of this soda brand, and I was wondering if you could go in the back to get some more," I replied. "Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't work here." Then I continued to browse a selection of drinks, hoping that would be the end of it. But Karen insisted, "Of course you do. Now go get me the soda." I tried to be polite and said, "No, I don't." I pointed at the car wash logo on my shirt, hoping it would clear things up. But she completely ignored it. She wasn't giving up easily. "Give me your name because I'm going to complain to your manager." I knew that the manager of the car wash was on vacation in Hawaii, so this didn't faze me much. I shook my head and whispered, "I won't give you my name. You don't need my name, because I don't work here." But she wouldn't take no for an answer. "You do need to give me your name." "No, I don't. Now please, I just want to," she interrupted. "Give me your name now." At this point, Karen was panty screeching and I started to feel a bit uncomfortable. Just then, an employee who happened to be a friend of mine came down the aisle. The employee asked, "I am hearing a commotion. What seems to be the problem here?" I tried to explain the situation, but Karen cut me off and started ranting about how I was being rude, lazy, and should be fired because the customer is always right. My friend, who knew I didn't work there, tried to reason with Karen, but she was having none of it. "I demand to speak with your manager about this employee," Karen yelled. My friend calmly replied, "Please do not yell. There are other customers than yourself and him. He's not a customer, he's a worker. Now give me the manager, or I will have both of your jobs." My friend decided it was time to call the manager, but before the manager could arrive, Karen took things to a whole new level. She grabbed my collar with both hands and threw me toward the manager, knocking him over. That was the last straw. The manager told his employee to call the police. As Karen realized the gravity of the situation, she freaked out and made a run for the exit. But as luck would have it, running in high heels is not the best idea. She lost her balance and fell over. It was almost comical in a way. In the end, she was arrested for assault and I managed to escape with my drink for free. It was quite an eventful day, to say the least. I couldn't help but shake my head at the audacity of some people. It was a strange experience, and one that I won't forget anytime soon. This happened a few years ago and I want to share my story with you. A tale of how I got sweet pro revenge. You see, at the time, my fiancée, now my wife, and I were on a quest to find the perfect dresses for her bridesmaid for our upcoming wedding. We were driving all around town, from one place to another in search of something that would make her happy. It had been a rainy day and the roads were pretty slick. We had just left David's bridal and were making our way out of the plaza when it happened. As I was reaching the intersection where the plaza met the road, another car came turning in. Sadly, the driver couldn't hit the brakes in time and he skidded right into the front end of my car on the driver's side. Fortunately, everyone was okay, but our cars had seen better days. As we got out of our cars to assist the damage, I couldn't help but notice that his car seemed completely unharmed, while mine had suffered a minor dent. The other driver was around 45 years old and he had his son in the car with him. We exchanged names and phone numbers and he explained that he was on his way to work. I told him we were out shopping for our wedding. I must admit I was pretty naive back then when it came to handling accidents. The other driver suggested that since we were both busy, we should handle things ourselves without involving the police. My mistake was agreeing to that. We didn't call the police and he told me to get an estimate for the damage so we could figure out what it would cost to fix. 2 days later, I took my car to a repair shop and they quoted me $1,100 for the bumper replacement. I texted the other driver and he assured me that in 2 months he would be getting scholarships when he returned to school, and he could pay me in cash at that time. Again, naively, I agreed, thinking it was a fair arrangement. A week went by and I followed up with him regarding another estimate I had received, which was lower than the original one, just $900. But to my surprise, he never responded to my messages. I sent more texts over the next few days, but still there was no reply. And that's when it hit me. He had bailed on me. Frustrated and feeling deceived, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands and find this guy. All I had was his name, a useless phone number, and a general idea of where he worked. I took to Facebook trying to find him and I was pretty sure I had struck gold. I looked through his family members and found what appeared to be his son. My soon-to-be sister-in-law was around the same age as his son. So I decided to go full-on detective mode. I used her Facebook account, changed her last name to match theirs, and messaged the son. I told him I thought we might be cousins and asked a few more questions about his dad's name and job. He confirmed the name and place where his dad worked. I was thrilled with the progress I was making. The next day, I drove back to the area where the accident had happened and found his workplace. I located his car and discreetly took pictures of his license plate. Armed with this information, I went to the courthouse and filled out the necessary paperwork. The clerk informed me that they could either mail the form to his work address or for a $25 fee have an officer hand-deliver it to him. Of course, I paid the $25, thinking it would be a fitting way to embarrass him at his place of work. A few weeks later, we were summoned to court to see if we could reach a resolution before proceedings to a formal hearing. The other driver showed up and we sat down with a mediator. She explained everything to all of us and I told him I didn't want to go through with this, but he had stopped responding to me. He claimed that his phone had been stolen, so he had to get a new one. In my mind, this excuse didn't quite add up. The mediator asked him to step outside for a moment and then cautioned us not to trust him, as his story didn't make any sense. When the other driver returned, we read over the terms I had listed in the court documents. I had demanded $2,400, which included the original cost of replacement, gas expenses from driving back and forth, compensation for my time, and a little extra for the hassle he had caused. He agreed to pay, and he didn't like that I had gone to his job and taken pictures of his car. My response was simple. I didn't like that he hit my car in the first place. A few months later, he had paid the full amount in cash and he had to cover our court costs as well. I sold my damaged car and used the money he gave me to purchase a new one outright. In the end, I benefited from the situation, but I learned a valuable lesson. Next time, I will definitely call the cops and save myself the headache. In the end, my pro-revenge was sweet, but it's always best to handle such situations through proper channels. I, 24 female, am a seamstress/dress designer who works for private clients on commission. 2 years ago, my sister got married, and as my gift to her, I designed and made her wedding dress free of charge and all her bridesmaid dresses at cost of raw materials. My brother's and girlfriend, now fiancé, was part of the wedding party and knew I was doing this. And before I even started designing, she asked if for her and my brother's wedding, would I make her dress. I casually agreed. When actually making the gowns, my sister and her other 5 bridesmaids were so nice and pleasant to work with, but my brother's girlfriend was a nightmare. She kept asking me to make changes after we finalized the designs and I had already started making the dresses. She would cancel and just not show up to fittings, and she complains constantly of how it looked tacky and unprofessional. And she even ripped the fabric on purpose when I told her I could not make any more changes. And I had to go on a wild goose chase to get more of the same fabric in the right color. The place I bought it from no longer carried it. My brother proposed 2 weeks ago, and the first thing my new sister-in-law did was come over to me and ask when we could meet to start designing. Now, at this point in my career, I have dealt with my fair share of bridezellas and control freaks, and I know how to handle them. So I let her know when she could come to my studio for a consultation. Last week was her appointment and she came in all excited, but when I brought out my pricings and options for her, she got really mad, saying it wasn't fair to expect her to pay when we were family, and I had given other family theirs for free. I told her nicely that I charge for my work as would any other vendor she got for her wedding, and that we can look at the most affordable package I have if she was concerned about cost. At this, she totally lost it, screaming at me that I'm a worthless witch whose work isn't even good enough for her and that she was doing me a favor by letting me having this opportunity. I tried to calm her down so we could talk, but she just got worse, knocking over one of my display cases and shattering glass, beads, and expensive jewelry all over the floor. At that point, I was done and yelled at her to get out of my studio before I called the cops. Later that day, my brother called me and yelled at me for being so disgusting and unwelcoming to his fiancée. I explained to him that I'm more than happy to make her gown and her bridesmaids' gowns, but at a fair price. But he got even more upset and said that I had done our sisters for free, so I should do this one for free too, and now my parents and brother are mad at me, threatening to leave me out of the wedding if I don't make her a free dress, but I still think I should be paid for my work. Am I the jerk here? And now with some comments on the post. Someone saying, not the jerk. Print out a receipt for damages and give it to your brother and family. Then include the prices for your skills and material. Then send another bill asking for a deposit that will cover future damage and crap. Ask who's willing to pay all that, because no one in hell should it be you. If you know any other seamstresses/designers, pass the word so they know what they are getting into if they agree to work with her. Future sister-in-law should learn a very expensive lesson. But I'm a jerk like that. I'm thankfully at the stage of life where I don't give a damn about being nice or keeping the peace. Another commenter goes with, Not the jerk. Your future sister-in-law is a nightmare. I hope you took photos of the damages she made to your studio. Show your brother and parents the damages she caused. Send your brother and future sister-in-law a bill for the damages. Do not, under any circumstances, agree to make her wedding dress, even if they agree to pay. The third commenter adds, not the jerk. And make sure you send your soon-to-be sister-in-law the bill for the things she broke in your studio. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.